have here today. We definitely don't have enough chairs for everybody, so I appreciate everybody standing up. And I know that some of you will be going to the Plimptonville tour at 10 a.m. sponsored by the Society, so we're going to attempt to make this as efficient as possible. But we have a lot to talk about because this is a train station that needs to be recognized. So my name is Sam Ober. I'm the chairman of the Walpole Historical Commission. I also serve on the board of directors of the Walpole Historical Society. And although it might not seem like it, based on the way everything came together so well today, this ceremony has been a long time in the making. I want to particularly thank Christine Cochran, the vice chair of our committee. She was here last night helping to set this up. And of course, Roger Turner, who requires no introduction because of everything he's done, but he was extremely helpful as well. The process of putting Union Station on the National Register of Historic Places and in ultimately placing the plaque on the building and in planning this ceremony stretches all the way back to the 1980s. Starting around that time, multiple efforts were undertaken over many years, including as recently as 2002, led by volunteers on the commission to put the building on the National Register. All these efforts were unsuccessful for one reason or another. So in 2014, then Historical Commission Chairman Michael Amaral, who's actually here this morning, attempted to start the process again, and this time he decided to do it right, which was to actually hire a professional consultant by securing grant funding from Rockland Federal Credit Union, and we actually hired Kathy Broomer to submit an official National Register application. Kathy's actually was not able to be here this morning, but she came with extensive qualifications. She knew exactly what needed to go into a successful National Register application, and she succeeded in 2016 after a 2-year process in getting it added to the National Register. It was only the third structure in Walpole to be listed on the National Register. And at that point, in 2016, when that happened, there was an important item missing, which was that there was no plaque recognizing this important status. And this changed when Colin Harding, a Walpole native now living in Virginia, stepped up late last year, and he offered to pay for the plaque, and it's actually outside the door for those who might have missed it. I hope you'll make sure to look at it on your way out. It was installed earlier this year with the MBTA's support. So with the plaque in place, and with this year being the station's 125th anniversary of construction, we decided to finally hold a ceremony commemorating this station's important role in Walpole's history. We are incredibly grateful to Randy Wilhite of Real Good Coffee, who opened the station up for us this morning, and also, of course, the MBTA for being supportive. And we actually have someone from the MBTA here as well, who I will introduce later. So as you can see, there have been a whole lot of people involved from the 1980s to today, and I would actually encourage you to review the back of your program for a list of those who have been involved. We've made every effort to list everyone who may have been involved, but we likely will not have covered everyone, so any exclusions are not intentional. So, needless to say, this train station has seen a lot of history, and Walpole as a town has a lot of railroad history. And as the National Register application states, the building has been associated with more than 7 decades of transitions in railroad operations in eastern Massachusetts. It is today the oldest station remaining on both of the rail lines that pass through this crossing. There are very few late 19th century wood frame passenger stations in this state, and this is the best preserved of those. The National Register application for this station includes 17 pages of written documentation and narrative, along with pages upon pages of photos and source documentation about the railroads in Walpole and this station's history. So when I had to make a speech, I had to look at 17 pages and had to figure out how to condense that down to only 5 minutes of remarks. So I'm going to do my best to provide a very broad overview of why this structure is so historically significant. And our keynote speaker, Rick Hurst, who I will introduce in a few minutes, will hopefully provide some color and some commentary based on some of the anecdotes and memories he has of this station. And there's, of course, a lot of other documentation which you can read and review at your leisure. We have an exhibit in the back of the room as well. And we plan to do an exhibit at the Walpole Historical Society, and hopefully the Walpole Library over the coming months. So there's a lot of information about this station available. So one of the most interesting results of the National Register process was that we we actually realized that we had the date of the construction of the station wrong for a long time. Some of you may recall that there were actually signs in the building that were put up sometime around the 1970s, I think, that said that the station was constructed in 1883. After the National Register application process started, we found that in fact there had in fact been a Union Station on this site constructed in 1883, but it actually burned down in 1893 and was quickly replaced by this one. Now, that might seem like a minor issue, it's only 10 years, but for those of us in the room who are historians and who value history, we know that 10 years is actually very significant. The first Union Station was similar to the structure, but it appears to have had a more pronounced Y shape with a signal tower at the center, just like this one does, or just like this one did, I should say. That structure was completely destroyed in April 1893 by fire, and a new station was swiftly constructed on roughly the same foundation. It is noteworthy that both the original Union Station and the one we are in now had indoor plumbing and restrooms at a time when many rural train stations used outhouses. So this was very much a cutting-edge train station for its time. The new station was constructed by Melzar Allen, who is very famous in his own right. He was a Civil War veteran in Walpole, and he was a member of the famous Allen family, for which Allen's Corner is named, along with several houses in the East Street area. So, you know, Walpole's growth throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s was very much driven by the railroads. Around the time of the station's heyday, there were 2 tracks running at both lines. So basically there would be 2 tracks this side, 2 tracks that side, which is an indicator of just how much train traffic comes through here. Walpole's first railroad line, which runs over the current east-west tracks now used by the MBTA Franklin line, came between 1847 and 1849, and was joined by the intersecting Mansfield and Framingham line, which is that line, sometime between 1867 and 1870. There was actually once a 3rd railroad line in Walpole as well, south of the town center. That no longer exists. But, so there were basically 3 railroad lines, many stations in this town, and for a town like Walpole, that was a big deal. So this spot that we are on, being the intersection of 2 rail lines, is a very happening place. There were originally 2 stations for each of the lines, but in 1881 there was apparently a fatal accident here between 2 trains, which illustrated the need for an improved signal and switch system. So a large signal tower was constructed around 1882, and that actually included a ticket office on the first floor, and then in 1883 the first Union Station was constructed at the base of it. And as I said earlier, that station was gone by 1893 and was replaced by this one. This is in fact the only remaining structure that was originally at this railroad crossing. There was actually a fairly large complex of structures here. From the 1890s into the second quarter of the 20th century, there were buildings on 3 sides of this crossing, including an interlocking station, freight buildings, and an express office. And at one time, you could get onto a train here and go all the way to New York, which is why there were rooms for luggage included in the new station. These rooms have now been converted to offices, which are over there. And after 1933, the station served passengers only on the east-west route after passenger service was ended on that line, rendering the second waiting room on that side essentially obsolete. So that space was then partitioned into offices and a hallway, which is similar to what it is now. And the east-west route, of course, is now owned by the MBTA and continues to be very successful to this day. And between the 1930s and 1940s, both routes became single tracks, which they are now. So, of course, there's a lot of history that I've left out, and that's why we have Rick Hurst. And so I wanted to introduce him. Rick is a Walpole native. He grew up on High Plains Street. He graduated from Walpole High School in 1965. And at an early age, he would often visit this station and observe the trains passing by. And he became fascinated with the history of the station and Walpole railroads overall. He explored all over the station, including the attic and cellar, and made friends with many of the railroad employees here. After college and service in the U.S. Navy, Rick started a 40-year career working for various railroads throughout the state, including Amtrak, Conrail, and the MBCR, and he retired in 2014. In 1975, he led an effort to repaint the station, and he may be able to talk more about that. Rick is widely considered to be the preeminent expert in Walpole Railroad history and has written and researched extensively on the station's history. His information provided a lot of the source material for the National Register application. So with that, please welcome Rick Hurst.
morning.
I grew up in this building, it seems like, when I go back, there's so many memories from bicycling up from High Plain Street down here in 1957, and I was just attracted to this place. The trains, the people, and back in that day, there were many more people working for the railroad. The railroad has really become automated in many respects. But you had the operator's office behind here, because the big tower had been torn down in April of '46. It was a huge tower. For years, Timmy Delaney of the Walpole Delaneys worked in that tower. And when that was moved, they put in a 9-lever machine in this office so that now they didn't need a ticket seller and a tower operator. They could combine the jobs, and that's what happened there. But we had a section gang that was headquartered here. We had a track supervisor, Bill Mountain, whose office was over across with the clerk. We had Frank McCarthy, who was the signal maintainer. And we had a Carmen over in a group of buildings now where CSX is their headquarters over here. And you had an agent at the Freight House down on East Street, right across from where Fales used to be. So it was a busy place, there was a lot going on, and yet they could take time to explain to a 10-year-old kid who was interested in the railroad how it functioned and what went on. And this track you all crossed to get in there, probably most of you did. From an early time, Gus Fertitta, he was the high rail track inspector. And he said, "Do you know what that is out there?" I said, "Well, it looks like a track." He says, "It's an important track. It's called a Y, W-Y-E, because it connects one line of railroad with another line." And you'll notice it's all upgraded. It's got new rail, it's got new stone and everything, because this is the route of the MBTA special to Gillette Stadium. And it has been since about 1971, when the Patriots started playing out there. And it's a beautiful piece of railroad. Y, W-Y-E. We had, this was not as busy a place in the time I grew up. It was busier than it is today. But you had a through freight from New Bedford to Lowell, and that later on got changed to Boston to Lowell. You had a train from Boston to Hartford to Maybrook, New York, over the Poughkeepsie Bridge. This was an alternative route to the shoreline, because until 1899, it was not a piece of cake to get from Boston to New York. And this line over here, the New York and New England, boasted in the early 1890s of a 6-hour trip. This was unheard of. 6 hours from Boston to New York, right past this station, on its way down to Willimantic, Connecticut, and down to New Haven, and in that way. It was not until 1899 that they bridged the Thames River into London, and that changed that whole arrangement. Probably for the better, ultimately. We had local freights here. You'd have BX9 would come out of Boston, First Street Yard, and come out here. And usually his move was to go around the north leg of the Y. I recall the people calling it the Framingham Y, because ultimately that's where it's headed. And they'd come up, they'd switch their cars out and get ready to do the switching. Kendall was a big user of the railroad. I remember unloading freight cars there in the summer of '65. And you'd get cars of cotton, a lot of cars of cotton. You'd see these southern box cars. And they offload that into the bleachery, all different kinds of cotton for different products. It was fascinating, I thought. And then we load milk filters, made here, sent out to the Green Bay warehouse by freight car. And Bedford Park was a distribution center in Illinois outside of Chicago. A lot of freight cars out of here to Bedford Park. There was a lot going on. Then up here where where's Roger? Roger Turner's family had the Milk and Ice Company, and they used to ship ice by rail out of here. Years later, Blanchard Lumber Company built a building up there, and they could get cars of lumber from the West Coast. There was, you know, over here, buried in the weeds, you can see what's left of the Frank Fisher coal trestle. And the railroad owned the trestle, and the cars would come in there. I can only remember seeing a couple of cars there because by that time, coal was pretty much done as a heating fuel. And if you explore and watch out for the ticks, there's still pieces of it left, of our local history. Chandler Manufacturing Company, Keppel bought it. They always call it the Chandler Mill. It's on the other side of the Mansfield in Framingham. It had its own siding up behind it, and they made furniture. I remember seeing what was left of the siding, but I never saw the switcher in there at all. But it was a busy place. It was an exciting place, and occasionally I'd get invited up to the cab for a cab ride. That just made my day. Sit up there and just listen to the engines, and listen to the banging of the cars, and watching the crews with their hand signals. You know, okay, you know, that's it, stop. Just very interesting, and it was fun to be a part of that. It just dawned on me, I forgot the other train, Fall River to Fitchburg, to Framingham, Fall River to Framingham. That lasted right through the end of the New Haven. So most of my time here, this was the New York, New Haven, and Hartford, both lines. It had merged, they'd taken it over, and that's what became the railroad. And those were nocturnal trains. You saw those road jobs coming through at night. So if you were down here 11 o'clock, 11:30 p.m., that Fall River job was up here. Go to Framingham, interchange with the Boston and Albany, interchange with the New Haven lines to Framingham, to Fitchburg and to Lowell. Turn around and come back in the wee hours. And there's still a train on CSX that comes through here fairly early in the morning. And at night, it goes back. Anyway, those are some of the thoughts. I can't get over the fact that how much technology has changed the railroad in so many ways. When I was here in let's say 1965, Jimmy Carroll was the second trip operator. Second trip is 3 to 11. And he'd say, okay, now here's how we're going to do this. I want you to set this lever this way. And we'll give him a clear signal to go west to Blackstone. At that time, this wasn't the Franklin line. This was the Blackstone line. And then in South Station, at the track head, it said Blackstone Local. You know, Norwood, Walpole, so on and so forth. And he'd say, okay, get that signal. And you'd see it come in on the interlocking board. There was a model board above the machine. And you'd see it come in as 2 white lights. Okay, you knew it had come in, you knew he had a good signal. And there were certain things you had to do before you got that. And then after the train arrived, you'd make a note of it, because you had to report to the dispatcher. And then the train would leave, and you always rang 2 bells. Ring, ring. And that sent the message to Franklin and to Blackstone. By that time, most of the time, we were dealing with Blackstone, which went away in 1966. But it was just a different time, and it's all controlled electronically from the 5th floor at South Station. Amtrak's facility up there, and it's just a whole different world. You know, everything is tracked, the computer tracks everything. In here, they'd have a station record of train movements. Oh yeah, train 917 arrived Walpole 310, departed 311, with button 46, button 25, you know, boom, the whole thing. And it's just changed so dramatically. But anyway, those are a couple of things I remember about Walpole. Is the railroad people who just were so good about helping me learn about it and to make a lifetime career out of it, and who were proud of their railroad at a time when it was declining. You know, the automobile has just done such a job. If it weren't for the MBTA, there'd be no trains out here, and that's just the reality. Anyway, it's a great place. I used to sweep this floor and help Jimmy Carroll sweep it, and we take old newspapers. He'd say, take newspapers, they'll clean the windows, and they sure did. I'll tell you, I never saw anything like newspapers and some water to clean windows. It was fabulous. Anyway, thank you very much for letting me speak with you. Just a wonderful place.
I did want to mention a little about why it's called Union Station. A Union Station is actually a specific type of railroad station. It is a station that is constructed to serve passengers of more than one rail line. So this station, it was essentially constructed to be symmetrical with waiting rooms and restrooms on each side of the structure, with the signal tower in the center for each of the train lines. There was a time when it was not called Union Station. For example, in the early 1900s, this station no longer served more than one railroad company, since both lines were operated by the New Haven Railroad. So at that time, the station became more commonly known as Walpole Station. Since freight trains operated by CSX now operate on that route, technically, I suppose it would still be referred to as Union Station. However, the MBTA did recently acquire those tracks with plans for future use. So I'm not quite sure at what point it can no longer be officially considered a Union Station, but at least we will call it that anyway, because it was still built at the union of two airlines. So next I want to introduce some of our elected officials who have some presentations to make. I will start with State Senator Paul Feeney.
Thank you. Wow, what a great crowd. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you so much, Rick. That was unbelievable. That presentation, just, and those stories and the narrative of this location. And I think I was sitting there listening to Rick, and I said, you know, we're here to commemorate a building, certainly, being put on the National Register, the plaque that certifies that. But when you listen to Rick, it's a reminder that, you know, this is about people. This is about so many stories. When you stand in this building, and it's certainly not just a brick and mortar, or in this case, the wood, it's about the stories and the people that have worked here over the years, that still come here to this day to find comfort on their daily, mundane commuting to work. Those who drop their luggage here to go somewhere else, probably in good times and sometimes in bad. It's those stories, the stories of people here, that add to the unique character that we celebrate. I think we all understand that, and certainly Rick's frame of reference, I think, is special and unique in the fact that he found comfort and solace here, not just in the physical building, but with the people that he spoke to. That's certainly unique, and I think this is evidence. You see so many people here today that we celebrate that character, not only here in this one particular place, but throughout the community of Walpole. So I'm blessed to be here with my colleague, State Representative McMurtry, and with local officials. I want to give a presentation from the State Senate in reverence for what we're here to do today. I'll read it to you now. It says, from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts State Senate, official citation. Be it known that the Massachusetts Senate hereby extends its congratulations to the town of Walpole, Union Station, in recognition of being recognized on the National Register of Historic Places. And be it further known that the Massachusetts Senate extends its best wishes for continued success, that this citation be duly signed by the President of the Senate and attested to and a copy thereof transmitted by the Clerk of the Senate, signed by President Karen E. Spilka, Clerk William F. Welch, and very proud State Senator yours truly, Paul R. Feeney, September 22nd, 2018. Thank you so much.
Because we have some more resolutions, so we should. So next we will have State Representative Paul McMurtry, who is representing Sean Dooley in the program, and all of us.
Good morning. I'm pleased to be here on this beautiful morning for the occasion of celebrating Walpole's historic past. And I want to acknowledge that I joined one of the hardest working state senators in the Commonwealth, Senator Paul Feeney. I also bring the greetings and congratulations of my colleagues in the House, Representative Rogers, Representative Cathey, and Representative Dooley, along with Congressman Stephen Lynch, whose support of the National Register of Historic Places makes celebrations like this possible, not only in the Commonwealth, but across the country. Together, representing the town of Walpole, we have the good fortune of joining our local selectmen, including Selectman Salvador And I want to acknowledge and thank the leadership of former Walpole resident Colin Harding, along with the support of the Walpole Historical Commission and with the leadership of Sam Ober for making this worthy designation possible. Walpole's Union Station was originally established, and Mr. Hurst I may stand corrected on this, from Walpole to my hometown of Dedham, where it would meet with the Boston and Providence Rail Line, connecting commuters and commerce. And today's Walpole Station is still an active part of our transportation infrastructure. So today we come together to recognize and acknowledge, as the Senator said, when we remember our past, our people, events, places, and buildings, we build a stronger community and a better tomorrow. This morning, Walpole honors not only the impressive Walpole Union Station building, but all those citizens who built this community into the great place it is to live and work. And I want to congratulate each and every one on a job well done. And Sam, if you could come on over, I have as well a citation from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It reads, the House of Representatives, be it hereby known to all that the Massachusetts House of Representatives offers its sincerest congratulations to the Walpole Historic Commission for in recognition of the designation of Walpole's Union Train Station on the National Register of Historic Places. The entire membership extends its very best wishes and expresses a hope for future good fortune and continued success in all endeavors. Given this 22nd day of September, signed by the Speaker of the House, and then yours truly, along with the colleagues from the House of Representatives representing this great town, Representative Dooley, Representative Rogers, and Representative Capta. Congratulations on this no small accomplishment and a job well done.
Thank you. All right. All right, and then, so we also want to acknowledge those who did a lot of work. And first of all, this would not be possible, as I said, without the grant funding from Rockland Federal Credit Union. And so the town of Walpole wanted to formally recognize the credit union. So Marlene, if you could come up, and Sutton Salvatore has something to present to you. Thank you.
Hi.
I'm going to spell your last name.
Bristol Garden.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can shorten it.
So, the town of Walpole would like to especially acknowledge Rockland Federal Credit Union. Without their help and the money to pay for the study and pay for the report, this building would not have been able to be put on the National Register. As one of the newest members of the community, one of the newest buildings of the community, they came up with several thousands of dollars to support this effort to protect one of the oldest buildings. And so I'd like to present this plaque. We're going to have one here to put in this building, and we'd like them to take one home and put it in a place of prominence, hopefully. Indicate, presented in gratitude to the Rockland Federal Credit Union for its contribution to the successful effort to include Walpole's Union Station on the National Register of Historic Places, so that Walpole's history will be preserved for years to come.
Thank you.
So we have some presentations to the MBTA along with Randy will had a real good coffee, but he's in the back. Randy, are you able to get up here? Okay. If you'd like to come. So we're joined by Ryan Coholand, Chief Railroad Officer of MassDOT. If members of the commission could, if a couple members of the commission could join me, because we have some presentations. So we did frame a certificate, which we want to hang here. So you can have that. And then we'll figure out a place to put it. And then we have a bunch of historic photos, which we noticed that there are actually no historic photos hanging here, which people should probably know that this is a historic train station. So we have 4 photos which we want to hang here, and you can take one to hang in your office as well.
That's great.
So so there you go. So So you can take all this. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, we're all good. Do we want a picture? Or no, we're good, okay. Well, we'll take a picture after.
Yeah, buddy, yep.
Yeah, after. All right, so with that, so I just wanted to briefly talk about the future of Union Station. Kathy Broomer in the National Register application actually made reference to the fact that this train station is fairly underutilized by the MBTA, and the future of it may be unclear. In 2010, when the MBTA conducted a feasibility study for offering full-time rail service to Foxborough through Walpole, 2 of the 3 service options identified in the study actually called for construction of a new train station. This would, of course, ensure that Walpole residents would be able to board the train to Foxborough safely, whereas in the station's current location, this would not be feasible. And indeed, next year, full-time rail service to Foxborough is expected to start. The National Register status does not protect it from being torn down. The only protection is the Town of Walpole's demolition delay bylaw, which allows the Historical Commission to impose a delay of up to 12 months on the demolition of a historically significant structure. But we hope that everyone in this room, especially the MBTA, which owns this building, will stand with us to protect the structure for years to come, because it's lasted 125 years, and we want it to last another 125. So with that, I encourage you to enjoy some refreshments, some real good coffee, and also feel free to review some of the historical material and exhibit that we have on display in the back. Thank you.